Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and today is the, just noticing my bangs are doing weird things. Today is the 13th, 14th. It's the 14th today. Good morning, Sam. I'm trying to think what time I woke up. My sleep has actually been really pretty good lately. I wake up occasionally, but my body is kind of hurt all over, and I don't know, I think there may be more of a, I don't know, I feel like sometimes I'll get these periods where I'll have certain pain for no reason, or I'll have just certain things happen for no reason, and then I think it's just, I feel like there's something, it's connected in with something, something transformational that's going on. A lot of times I will feel that. So, excuse me, I kind of feel like that's what's happening now. Like there's, I'm getting, like I've been talking about all week, I've been having these like downloads and then different things that are happening, and I feel like my body is reacting to that. Because to me, it's just another thing that shows me that is in fact happening. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, I did my kind of morning rituals and so forth, and the topic that has come up for today has to do, it was interesting because the cards that I pulled were, let's see if I still have them here actually. Yeah, I do. So it was like they came out in sets. So first of all, we had these two together. We had Mind and Intensity together, which is the, I think, Page of Clouds and the, I want to say, is that Page of Clouds or is that the Knight? I can't remember. Anyway, one of them is a page and one of them is a knight, but it's basically swords and wands, okay? Got this kind of energy. And so if you put those together, you realize you're talking about the intensity of the mind, right? And then the other cards that came up, though, were Creator and Integration, okay? So this is interesting because one of the things that came up, there's been, like I said, I know that the topic of these kind of angelic downloads has been kind of a popular one here. So I can say a little bit, there's certain things I can talk about. Azrael is still very heavily pointing to something happening at the full moon, which will be Monday, actually. And it was, so I'm getting a whole lot of information around, it was kind of, it's like, I don't know, whatever, like that's going to be a big pivot point. Let's put it that way. I think there's going to be a balancing, which is why what makes me think of it is I'm seeing cards like Integration. I'm seeing cards like Creativity, and I'm seeing this idea of intensity. And this is the kind of thing, whatever it is that, because like I said, I've been getting a lot of my own messages about what this means for me personally. And basically, what's been said to me is don't get the mind so involved. Like the intensity of the mind. The mind wants to go in and say, oh, is it going to be this? Oh, is it going to be this? And basically, the message I got this morning is well, whatever it's going to be, it's not something that the mind can really approach. I mean, you might have images, impressions, there might be things, but there's something, whatever's going on, it's like the mind's not going to be able to. It's going to be more felt, which I think is why I'm talking a bit about what's felt in the body this morning. This is a really intense time. This T-square has been very intense. I have some friends who are traveling at this time, and I'm like, have extra protection and so forth, like spiritual protection and stuff when you travel, because it's just the intensity of it. Today is one of those days where when I got my looking at my daily horoscope, it was basically saying that whatever aspect Mercury is making today, and again, I've just woken up pretty recently, so I haven't looked really hard at what that is, but they're saying this could be, basically the net result is that today could be a day where people, it's aspecting Pluto somewhere, that's what it was. But in any case, it's saying that this could be a day where miscommunications, people flying off the handle all of a sudden. I know a lot of people I know who are immutable signs, like I said, which is Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. I'm hearing a lot from these people like that. Just even in situations where they feel like they know that they should keep their emotions under control, they're just kind of like, no, I can't, like, yeah, I know I should have, but I blew up anyway. It is kind of a it's almost like walking around in a minefield right now in terms of some of the energies and the way that they are. So we're talking about the intensity of mind here when that comes up. But actually, when I looked at that whole thing, I feel like what we're talking about here is like there's an integration that's going on, because one of the words I keep getting is balancing. Like it's a matter of that's something that has two sides and balancing it. I was talking a bit about the aeons, and the aeons being that the worldview that we have is lopsided and out of balance. So there's something about this that's going to kind of, tip the scales in the right direction, where everything is more here than like this. So, but integration, but it's interesting because when it's talking about integrating things like this, I think the key word here was the creator. And when I say creator, I don't mean some external creator. I mean us as creators. A lot of people, when they're trying to integrate content that comes from, whether it be unconscious psychological content, no matter what it is, I think people have a hard time, because a lot of times the way that we deal with things, we deal with it very cognitively. We say, oh, okay, I'm going to talk about this thing, or I'm going to go to therapy, or I'm going to, we have a thing where we want to talk things out with people. But we often undervalue the way in which creativity can actually be an aid to understanding this kind of stuff. Because we're often taught that creative pursuits are somehow extraneous. Like, you should be doing important things, like, I don't know, balancing your checkbook, or, paying your bills, and, taking care of this, and, having this fixed on the house, all the stuff that's supposed to be important. I'm not saying that stuff isn't important, but we often feel that anything that we do that's creative, a lot of times we feel it's a waste of time. I hear a lot of people say that. So if I suggest to somebody, when I see a lot of fifth house activity, like when I'm doing readings for things, people, I'm like, really what you should be doing is you should be spending some time in a creative pursuit. And, and they're just kind of like, oh, well, I don't think I'm a creative person, or, oh, I don't, I don't know. Oh, I could, like, if for example, sometimes I often will suggest journaling for people. Of course, I'm a very verbal person, so for me, words are the main way that I'm creative. And for me, it comes out in stories that I write. But for some people, it's, it's what they want to paint, or some people are musical, or some people are, there's different things that people are. And I think that, but a lot of people undervalue their creativity. Or even if they have something that they creatively enjoy, they go, oh yeah, well I find that interesting, but I don't have time for it. I don't have time. I have to worry about my job. I have to worry about, obviously there's certain, if you have a family and kids, you've got to worry about that. If you've got, just certain responsibilities, what we like to call adulting, right? But we don't think that the creativity again is superfluous. So I think what they're trying to highlight here is people underestimate the value of creativity. This is creativity of any kind, and the thing is too, and again, there's this idea of production that goes into this. The idea that you must if you're going to be a creative, if you're going to create something, if I'm going to sit down and write a story, or if I'm going to paint, I have to do something with it. Okay, I have to, I have to exhibit it somewhere, or I have to post it somewhere, or I have to publish it somewhere. That isn't necessarily true. I mean, I have whole books of writings and stuff that I wouldn't. It's not that anything terribly secret in them, but I wouldn't share them with anybody. They're just for me, and a lot of times people just feel like, that's work. I only write stuff if somebody tells me I have to. If I'm in school writing a paper or something like that, that's the only time I'm going to ever, do anything. Or it's just too much of an effort. I have to admit I'm guilty of that when it comes to painting, because I do like to paint. I was taught watercolor. And again, I'm not like, I'm not any kind of, great master at watercolor. But at the same time, I like the watercolors that I do, but they're for me, I'm not, I do have a card deck of one of them, But right now, all that's just for me. If I ever do something with it, then yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I won't. You know, and maybe if you had somebody who was versed in art, they look at it. It's interesting too, because you have people who are like art critics and you have people who are like literary critics. Okay, and I think that may be part of the problem for people too, because there's a lot of people who want to talk about, you know, what makes good art, what makes good poetry. This is a question I continually asked in graduate school. I was like, especially in poetry, I said, okay, well, tell me, Dr. Peggy Samuels, who was a real, she's great woman. I mean, I'm not saying this, but she was somebody who was very, very strict about criticism. Like, if you brought in psychoanalytic approaches and stuff, she'd go, well, it's not literary criticism. You know, like, it has to be in this school or in this genre. You know, she had a very, very strict and disciplined idea about what was criticism. So I said to her, okay, Peggy, well then can we talk about what makes a good poem? And she never really could answer that question for me. She'd be like, well, you know, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it could vary. It could be this, it could be that. And I'm like, yeah, the bottom line is, you know, there's so much, these are areas that are so established. They're considered to be sort of like the bedrock of a civilized society, right? One's ability to participate in the humanities. In fact, one of the hallmarks of a dark age is the fact that all of that goes away, which is interesting when you consider the pushback that we've had against the humanities here lately in the world. I think, what was it the other day? I saw something posted on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it is, which again, the only reason I actually ever look at X is because it pops up on my, the notifications pop up on my phone, and when I post my podcasts, I will post it to X. That's pretty much the only thing I post, and there's a few astrologers I follow on there. I follow Larry the Cat from 10 Downing Street. I follow, you know, I have certain things that I look at, that I don't seem to be able to find. You know, I don't know, maybe there'd be an Instagram equivalent. In some cases, there's not. So, but somebody had posted the other day about back to the Paris Olympics and the opening ceremony and how embarrassing it was for the world that the Americans did not know, you know, that they were looking at a bacchanal and not at the Last Supper. Okay, and you know, in that, and then everybody was freaking out. And like I said, I think I've already said this, but when I saw that the Pope was saying he was saddened by this, and I'm like, no, you don't. I'm sorry. I expect that you have had a classical education. I mean, I know he's more of a science guy, but I mean, I still feel the Pope should have had some kind of classical education. If he's, you know, if you're going to be Pope, I mean, you're just talking about partially the history of your own institution. So, to me, there was no excuse for him not knowing what that was, unless he was just against bacchanals. I can't remember exactly what his beef was, but it was just, you know, I'm like, okay, well then you just clearly don't know the history of Christianity either. So, but it was interesting because somebody in the thread about this had said, they said, you know, it's so embarrassing. You know, don't you think we should just, like, when people go to school, we should be required to take like just one 1 year of humanities, you know? And I'm thinking it's probably you need more than a year, but I'm laughing because, you know, I'm thinking about how working in education, there's so many schools now that are like my departments, we have been cut and cut and cut and cut. When I have, because I remember when I started there, it was like, you know, we all had, you know, we had the adjuncts offices. We were constantly shuffled around. Like, you know, where I would put my office one year, the next year it was like, oh no, you're all going to be herded into another room, or oh, you're going to have to share office space with psychology department, or you're going to have to share. Like, we never really had a place to hang our hat, and basically, you know, you were just kind of, because. And they couldn't afford to have full-time faculty. They wouldn't create positions in those departments. Like, you really, really had to push to get full-time positions in those departments. I remember they were touring with like instructor positions where they wanted you to teach like 8 classes a year for like $40,000. I'm like, get out of here. that's just abuse of people who have done the same kind of work. Yes, Mako's out there. My crows are out there, you know, agreeing with me here. It's just, you know, it was just, yeah, it was just really, there was definitely a disenfranchisement of the humanities, of these kinds of creative things. For the thing I mentioned right at the beginning, the fact that a lot of that is treated as somehow superfluous. But on the other hand, it's one of the defining characteristics of a civilization is how do you take the archetypal content of the world and how do you express it? How do you make it into something? You don't just make it into something through, how do you take, if we think about the fact that some of the best painters or the best writers are people who are very mentally tortured. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody needs, that only great writers are mentally tortured, but some of the material comes out is so visceral and it's so, and the thing is, the reason that people are really grabbed by it is because it's so relatable. It's something that people can be as critical as they want of the person, and that's also kind of a habit we have now too in this kind of socially conscious environment, is we try to say, well, that person wrote great poetry, but that person in their personal life did these 5 horrible things, so nobody should ever read their poetry, like that cancel culture kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I don't think, I think there needs to be a separation of creative output from the person. And if that person's a horrible person, then it's kind of like, okay, but there needs to, if they don't have any other mode of expression, if it's just kind of, neglect and being ignored is another piece of the problem. I just feel like people who have, obviously you don't, there's ways that you deal with people with narcissistic disorders, but I think a lot of times narcissistic disorders come out of people who don't have any other kind of an outlet. They're ignored. We're going to talk about Chiron over the weekend, and a lot of the wounding tends to have its origins in just you being dismissed, ignored, and what you either you're told, either your voice is just outright silenced, like I don't want to hear you, or just something that is very important to you is minimized by somebody else. A lot of the wounds are around that, and the wound, where that wound comes from may depend. So it may be a case, and maybe this is also coming up because we're going to be talking about Chiron this weekend. The Chiron, it's like creativity is one of the ways that's frequently cited as the way through a difficulty. If we have feelings of very, very deep rage towards somebody, for example. As I do more Rahani, people are finding that stuff that is buried, real suddenly they'll be like, oh my God, I remember this thing from childhood. Oh my God, I remember this thing. And the things they come out with, I'm like, whoa, and so it's kind of like, okay, well, how do you integrate that material now? How do you process it? Because there's a connection between the inner and the outer. So whatever you're projecting out, you don't want to project it onto other people. You don't want to take a person who really has nothing to do with it at all. Maybe he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then you take it out on that person. It's better to, take it out. It's better to write a story that somebody thinks is just ghastly and horrible in its content, but it's like, yeah, but it's expressing something. And isn't it not better to express it that way than to commit a violent act, for example? We're not advocating. Some people do blow off steam by like going out to the shooting range, or they, do different things, or take up sport. Some people, it's very physically expressed. That's another type of creative expression. Some people do it through sport and through physical activity. But there needs to be the steam valve. There needs to be something to let this off, or to allow us to integrate that content, because otherwise that content is always just kind of there, and the more that it's there and just either also ignored and not looked at and not dealt with, the more that it becomes vexing to you. The more that you're going to start to look at people around you and think, God, everybody around you is just against you and wrong, and I hate everybody because they're all you can get into these mindsets where you become very afraid of the outside world because you're seeing this thing everywhere, but it's coming from an unconscious place. And what you really need to do is say, okay, wait, I need to see what this is. I need to find a way to express this. But we have so many social rules about what you can and cannot express. One of the things that always annoyed me in the 80s was when they had this, I don't know, I remember the days of the PMRC, and that was, what's his name, Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore. And the whole thing about we have to have warning labels on music, and children should not be listening to, like, you know, certain rap groups or heavy metal, or, you know, and then there was the whole thing of, oh, they're all promoting Satanism and child abuse. I mean, it was, you look back, it's just, I mean, and there's still people who think that way. Let's be real. There's still people who think that way. And I always felt, even at the time, because I was very much into, like, you know, metal and punk and stuff like that. And I always thought, you know, this is, to me, this is like a lot of the, especially like with punk rock, a lot of the anger that's in it, and a lot of the way it's very visceral in the way that people like go to shows, and the way that they would, you know, the kinds of, forming a pit, which in the 90s became a much more dangerous thing. But it was you would do that, but people would do it, and people liked doing it because it was like an outlet. It was like an outlet for something in this transitional period that that you couldn't really express safely in other places. And so I was always kind of like the people who are saying, like, oh, well, this is bad for children and they shouldn't listen. I mean, look, when people are at a certain age, they need something that they can project that onto. The idea that, oh, you're going to listen to a song like, I think it was an Ozzy song? I'm trying to remember. Was it I forget which one it was. But they talk about things that now, and it's funny, even now here on Instagram, there's certain words I can't say, because, you know, that video might get blocked or downgraded, or, you know, and I'm like, you have to find a place to talk about these things. It's why I've always done dark work rather than light work, because I'm like, no, you want to get to what's in the dark, because when you integrate that, that's when you're actually going to find peace. That's when you're actually going to find balance or happiness. You have to work with that material, and you can't ignore that material. And everybody kind of wants to, like, you know, just like they come in for things. It's kind of like, you know, when you go for a massage, you go in and people, you know, the idea is, oh, the massage therapist is going to work on me and I'm going to be very relaxed. Well, I guess there are types of massage, but if you're really going to unknot all the muscles and everything, you're going to be hurting when you leave. I go for a Thai massage. My God, I had one of those when I was in Oxford, and literally, it's like they're beat the crap out of you. I mean, they pick you up and they're, you know, really getting in there. And literally, I was like, oh my God. I mean, I knew this is what it was going to be, so it wasn't like this was a shock to me. But I went out of there and it was like I just been in a fight. It was just like, oh God, everything just was sore. And she says, yeah, you know, well, when your muscles are less tight, then you'll be less sore. It was really funny. But it kind of gets down to that, you know? These are expressions of things. And so, and that's why it always used to also annoy me when they would, like, the schools started being like, oh, well, I'm going to read we're going to start reading the journals of students or their writings. And if we see anything in there that indicates violence, we're going to pull them out, and now they're going to have to go. I'm like, no, that now, because now there's the sense of you're being punished for trying to work through the feeling. Okay? There's a punishment, like, this can never be spoken, this can never be said. And it's like, look, it has to be said. There has to be a venue to be able to say it. And I understand that when people have gone through very bad things, they're saying, like, well, I don't necessarily want to hear it. But a lot of the problem here, I'm coughing, right? A lot of the problem that we have with voice is that people are not allowed to use their voice. It's like, no, it's not socially acceptable for you to use your voice. And you don't integrate things, because then it's all back here. And then, of course, the other result of that can be depression, because because the anger you're not allowed to express, or whatever feeling it is, whatever feelings you have, you're not, if it's not socially acceptable for you to vent them anywhere, then you vent them on yourself. And that kind of toxicity can not only make you depressed, but, it can also affect the way that you relate to other people, because you'll just see that toxicity in other people. Really, that's the kind of thing, if you're talking about people who are led to violence or mass shooting incidents or things like that, It's because there is this thing that's going on, and there's no creative expression of it. There's no place for it. And, and again, I do recognize that there are some legitimately psychotic people out there, but I would probably say in a lot of cases, you just have somebody who feels like, they have this and they have nowhere to put it. They have no place. And not everybody wants, a fluffy kind of a space to do it in. I know I can think about my teenage years when I really was dealing, when I say dealing with darkness, I mean, yeah, well, I guess there was a lot of dark stuff that happened when I was that age. I kind of look back at it. It's funny how you kind of gloss over it and say, yeah, that just happened, whatever. But when I think about a lot of that stuff, for me, writing was an outlet. For me, listening to my music was an outlet. I mean, I actually did play guitar for a while. I mean, I had different outlets for it. And I did have people, you find your tribe, you find other people who you can talk to about these things. Frequently family wasn't the outlet. It was other people and it was other places. But a lot of times people feel like, oh, well, if you're thinking these kinds of things, then you immediately or people need to be on a medication, or they need. If you read the DSM now, it's really interesting. Like the last version when I was looking through DSM-5, and it was all the way that they characterize neuroses and other what they would call mental disorders. The way that they reorganized them across the spectrums, and some of them were just really, really interesting. I always found I found odd, oppositional defiant disorder. I always found that odd. I'm like, but that oppositional defiance is part of the teenage. I mean, that's part of developing an individuality. It's part of breaking away from the family and kind of being your own thing. It's that breaking off process. And yes, the breaking off process can be painful, but it happens. It's part of things. We don't, the things don't stay the same forever, and that's why you'll see like a lot of teenagers, they withdraw. They don't, they kind of like sit in their room and they put their music on and do whatever they're going to do. And, they don't want anybody to bother them because they're trying to process what's going on internally. And the idea that you need to have, we're going to, you're going to have some perky person come in and be like, we're just all going to talk about love today. You don't want to hear that. You're just like, yeah, go away. Like those are not the feelings I have. And that's another thing too. You don't want to just paint them over with this veneer of positive thinking or whatever. It doesn't help you integrate that material. You need to integrate it by taking it for what it is. And sometimes that means expressing things that people consider to be unpleasant. But that unpleasantness has to have an outlet. That unpleasantness has to have an outlet. And you don't want to take safe outlets away from people, because, you don't want somebody to take violent emotion and use it to shoot somebody or something like that. You don't want it to become that. And you also don't want to make people, a lot of people, it was something that came up about the hero myths. When I talk about that in my myth classes, the hero myths, frequently if we look at modern examples, like if you look at action films, when I was growing up, it was like, there's Charles Bronson and who was the other one I'm thinking of? What's his name? Sylvester Stallone is Rambo, or what was some of the other ones? Because I was thinking of the Death Wish series, and then there's plenty of examples. You know what I'm talking about. That it's like, okay, this is almost like the modern version of the hero myth, because it's the guy. It's like I'm thinking of Bronson's Death Wish. It's like, he's living in a community with all these old people, and now this gang moves in, and of course, then now there's your good versus evil narrative, right? The bad guys move in, and now he's the vigilante guy who's going to go out and, because the police aren't doing anything, and there's always that narrative, right? So he's the hero who has to deal with the crisis. But the problem is, the only way that the crisis is dealt with is everybody's dead, and there's nothing to be gained from it. Hero mythology says that the hero goes out, he may fight battles, he may do things, but ultimately there's something that's learned there, and there's something that's brought back to the community. That is, there's something new that's created out of it. That's the piece that we're missing in our kind of modern mythology. It's like, no, we just shoot everybody dead and then that's the end of it. And it's like, yeah, no, I mean, in these movies and stuff, it's like, and I think probably more movies that have come out more in the it seems to me in the 21st century that what's coming out now is more, maybe more nuanced than that, which I think is a good thing. I think there are writers who are trying to explore other plot lines and other narratives, because again, these things in culture that we view as distractions, I think it was Mircea Eliade who said myth exists chiefly in distractions. And we don't think that has any place. We treat it like, yeah, well, it's not functional. It's not about making money. It's not about, the day-to-day, operations of a company or something. So therefore, it's not important. And it's like, yeah, it's hugely important. It's part of what makes you a human community in the way in which you share your collective symbolism and the way in which you are able to work with the archetypes as they become part of your consciousness, as they constellate in and out. How are you working with that material? Because that's really powerful material. That's the material of existence and of life. And how are you working with that? Our center card today is participation. Okay. So this is about, how are we participating in the world? How are we interacting with others? How do you, if this is meant to be, the different colors on here are meant to represent, the different things that people have to offer. How do you fit in? Where do you fit in, and what do you bring to the table, right? How do we participate? And the inner feeling is, this guy again. We have the saboteur, the one that says that, we have to hide this behind a pleasant-looking mask, and so therefore, the idea is that this is like a sabotaging kind of character. And that's what it becomes, because then it's something that you start, because you can't express it, because you don't have a place to put it out there and to look at it, then it becomes the voice that just attacks you. and then you start sabotaging yourself. You start second-guessing yourself and second-guessing what you're doing. And that's what we're unaware of. What we are aware of is, this is the idea of celebration. Again, this idea of participating. Three of Cups is about participating with others in a joyful way, in an emotionally happy and fulfilling kind of a way. So we're aware that we want to celebrate and we want to participate with others, but we still have this inner thing that has to be that we feel like we have to hide behind a mask in order to be socially acceptable to people, right? So what do we do? Okay, we've got the Ace of Wands here, the Source card. Okay, getting back to source, getting back to that space where this is like the creative core. And frequently that's what they'll say, because that is actually the source of our creativity as well. You connect to what source is for you. They say that creative ideas are not, the reason I think you have a lot of creative ideas that you may talk about something or plot and somebody will go, oh, it's kind of like this. It's not necessarily that anybody's copying each other, okay? People will tell me about certain things and they'll be like, oh, that reminds me of this book or reminds me of that movie. And I don't really watch movies as a general thing. I mean, not in the last 15 years. But there's people who, but because we all kind of have this collective source, the symbols are going to come out in some way, and you're going to be able. That's why we can critique things in the sense of, oh, I can identify these are the themes that are going on here, and it's not that a person is just trying to necessarily repeat a tired trope. You will notice that in movies where somebody's just trying to make a buck, so they say, oh, everybody's into this narrative or that narrative, so I'm going to make a movie about that. That reminds me, we're gonna have an Alan Wattsism today. Of Alan Watts saying, if the point of your creative work is to make money or to, like the guys back when I was in high school are like, I learned to play guitar so I could meet women, like if that's your goal and not just expressing the thing in itself, then basically Watts was basically saying you're doing it wrong. It's not supposed to be about that. You inspired me to listen to Watts recently. Yeah. So what do you think of him? He's I love his stuff. When I was in college, I remember he was on WFMU, which is like I think one of the last freeform radio stations, and it's here in New Jersey. It's in Jersey City, and WFMU. Is the one, yes, the one Robert Plant donates a lot of money to because they have a no stairway to heaven policy. So, any case, that's just an aside. But they used to have an Alan Watts hour. I think it was on Thursday nights at 7 or something. Maybe they still do. I don't know. I haven't listened to them in a long time. But yeah, there was like this. So far, I love him. He's great. And he's great because he explains all of this stuff, and he explains it in a way that you can understand. Even though he was talking like in like the late 60s and, or throughout the 50s and 60s, really. I think he died in the early 1970s. The stuff, he may be talking about different things, but somehow you listen to him, you're like, yeah, you know what? This is still really relevant. He's great. His books are great, too. I own a lot of his books. In fact, the first Alan Watts book I ever ended up with was The Wisdom of Insecurity. And weirdly, it was my very, very religious aunt who had it on a bookshelf in her house. And my mom we went to go visit her and my uncle at their house when they were living not that far away at that time. But my aunt has since passed away, and actually both of them have passed away since then. But I was in high school, and they would sit around and they would be talking about stuff that I didn't feel I could participate in. So I would wander off into her front room where she had her books. And that was the first place I found Alan Watts. So I guess that's one thing my Aunt Sophia did get most of the time, most of what, I don't know, she was an interesting person. But I remember it's interesting, her name was Sophia too. It's like, that's where I find the first wisdom, right, in that place. But yeah, that was the first book I'd ever read, and the books, a lot of them are short, and they're very easily accessible. They're easy to listen to and to read. And yeah, I absolutely love him. So anyway, our outcome card for today is the Two of Wands, possibilities. We see the eagle kind of soaring above, looking at the bigger picture, getting a bigger view of the landscape, because that's the other thing that creativity does. As we explore things, as we go to source, and as we connect in with that material. Yeah, and what Watts was saying was just that the point of something. There should not, the point, there should be no point to it. This is why they even say about meditation, there's not a point to it. It's just something you do. It's something you're in. It's something that you be. It's not you, I'm going to meditate 5 minutes every day because I have the goal of achieving peace by this date. It's that way of thinking that we tend to have that's very corporate doesn't really apply, in a lot of truly human situations, because the idea, it was kind of like what we were saying with Amma the other day. You got to be in the present. You have to be in it. It's like Alan Watts said. The point of a piece of a dance or a piece of music is not to get to the end. He says because then the best songs would be the fastest one. There'd be one crashing chord and that'd be the end of it. You got through that fast. It's not all a race. But we always tend to think like we have to keep running. It's almost like there's somebody cracking the whip behind us, and we feel like we have to keep running. And it's just like, no, you're the whole point of it is to just be in it. The experience of being in it, because it gives you a sense of being, of being able to really feel things in a way that is not just about dissecting it with your mind, going, oh, okay, I'm having this feeling, and it means this, and it means that. It's just like it allows you to just kind of be in it. And that's really kind of the point, is just to be in it. Okay, so I pulled a Between Worlds card, and we have the Death card today. Speaking of my friend Azrael, who tells me that he's actually not death proper. He is just somebody who helps with, he's somebody who helps with transitions, but he's not the guy who I guess he is capable of doing that if we go back to the Passover, because he said, oh yeah, that was, some people say that was Samael. He's like, no, that was me. So it's interesting. So he has, excuse me, oh god, that was weird. He has that capability, he has that possibility, but let's see what this says in this oracle. An old bird rests atop a pile of bones where, I hear the crows out there, where, oddly enough, flowers are growing. This card signals significant change and, of course, an ending. It may be difficult, that's okay. Kind of what I'm talking about, separation, getting away from things. Do not turn away, but also don't dwell too long. Okay, yeah, when there's a transition, that's the whole point. You don't want to get stuck. Can you meet this moment with an open heart? Employ rituals for grieving and release, then let yourself be free. Yeah, that's the thing. the creative process is something that allows us to free ourselves. It's something that allows us to look at and negotiate and wrestle with whatever the thing is. And a lot of times, a lot of creative work may come out of things that have to do with grieving and loss, or just transitions that we're trying to trying to figure out where we are, what we're doing. So yeah, it's a case of like trying to figure stuff out. And it's not always helpful either to have people who are trying to, make you not feel the way that you feel, okay, because they can't deal with discomfort. And to be fair, a lot of times people will, when they see that you're upset or you're crying, and then they're just kind of like, oh, no, it's okay, here, let's do a nice thing. And I realize people are doing that because they just don't want you to be hurting. So it's not like not like they're doing a bad thing. But sometimes you just have to let yourself hurt. But you don't want to stay there, is what the point of this card is. Yes, you want to work through it, and you have that, but that's a release. That's a moment, and then that moment's gone. And that also is the thing. It's if we go back to our being in the dance or being in the piece of music, it doesn't go on endlessly. At some point it ends, and then perhaps a new dance begins. So yeah. So anyway, so that's what came up for today. Like I said, I know I'm going to see what's going to be coming up. Today I've got so much stuff to do. I've got some editorial work to do, which I said I was going to get done today. And what else did I have to get done? I have speaking of boring financial stuff, I've got some of that stuff to get done today too. And I also want to put together everything for the Chiron workshop this weekend. So, and then soon we're going to be coming up on the days where I got to do my readings for next week, because life is just whizzing by really, really fast. So anyway, so thanks for joining me today. And, obviously I'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday already. So, so we'll be back. And like I said, if I have any updates, from Azrael or anything else, I will certainly share them that I think pertain to more than just me. Then I will most definitely share them. But, so I hope you have a great day, and, we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Take care.